About this film, Hollywood Reporter's Dwayne Burge says, call something a real train wreck and it's considered a put-down. Not in this fast-track, no-stops chase movie with a massive train wreck scene that's going to have audiences scrambling for cover. Anthony Lane of The New Yorker says, it's a pleasure to find a thriller fulfilling its duties with such gusto. The emotions ring solid, the script finds time to relax into backchat, and for once the stunts look like acts of desperation rather than shows of prowess. And Letterboxd user Camp Bart calls it peak jeans plus dress shirt plus tie plus sweater vest / tweed jacket cinema. On this episode of Ruined Childhoods, we decide the fate of The Fugitive.
Sequel. Reboot. Which one will it be? It's the Ruined Childhoods podcast.
Greetings, Starfighters. It's Ruined Childhoods, your favorite podcast that talks about sequels, prequels, reboots, remakes, none of which actually exist outside of our minds.
Right, but on today's episode, we're talking about The Fugitive, which is an adaptation from a television series. So this is kind of an interesting one in and of itself because it is not its own original story. But nobody seemed to care at the time.
I mean, every now and again, one of these movies works out, and The Fugitive, having been adapted from a 1960s television series, very popular and successful one at that. This movie also comes out in 1993, when we have yet to be entirely inundated with just nostalgia and fan service. So this was at a time when it was still kind of like rare, and it was news that something was being remade or adapted into a film. So different times these were. John, how are you?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. I happened to watch a movie the other night that has come up in discussion on this podcast a long time ago, and I watched it over Zoom with our brother Scott and some of our friends, some hometown homies, and who get together every Friday over Zoom to just kind of like hang out and put on a movie together. They just kind of press play at the same time, and it's a audio mess because you can hear everybody's TV going. But we watched the 1979 Great Train Robbery. This one with Donald Sutherland and Sean Connery. And I have to say, it was in some ways a delight. It certainly was tricky to watch. It was very slow, but there were some moments where it was like, oh, this is actually pretty gripping action, during this actual like train robbery that's happening at the end. And, you see Sean Connery on the top of train cars, and you really feel, because it really takes its time, it's like, it almost plays out like in real time. And, we've become so used to, Sean Connery, certainly evokes James Bond, and modern day James Bond, he no problem, like, fighting on the top of a train car and all that kind of stuff. But like this character that Sean Connery plays is very much the way that I feel like it would be if you were having to navigate crawling on top of a train car that's moving very fast, when you don't have like James Bond levels of skill when it comes to acrobatics, parkour, things like that.
Well, it's one of the things I really like about action films from, I guess, pre-90s is that the tangibility of action movies, and even the more fantastical action movies, they're very much rooted in reality. The things that they do are very much human, whereas I feel like a lot of the action films that we see now, from the more recent James Bond movies to things like Fast and Furious, that feature humans, not, can't bring like, Marvel into this, but feature humans doing superhuman things pretty regularly. And it's something that actually we'll come back to as we talk more about The Fugitive, is just that sense of realism and believability in action films.
Yeah. Hold on one second. I need to move a pair of shoes that I could just hear Rufio chewing on a second ago. Hold on one second.
Move those shoes.
Not cool, my friend. Yeah, we'll definitely talk about that shortly, because you're talking about movies from after the 90s kind of losing that sense of realism. But The Fugitive in 1993, I really feel like it's, I don't know. I was just telling somebody earlier today that it's kind of a near perfect movie. I feel it, like, there's, it has kind of everything for me that I would want from like a thrilling, I don't know, kind of, it's like an adventure movie. I don't know if I would call it an action movie. It has a lot of the elements of an action movie, but it's,
well, why don't we why don't we get to news?
You've got some news?
I saw some news. There was some casting news that I saw earlier today in regards to the remake of White Men Can't Jump.
Oh, right. Yes.
Yes, it looks like I cannot remember the person's name who was cast.
Nor should you remember the whole person's name, because this is that person's very first audition. And they got the Woody Harrelson role of for the White Men Can't Jump remake. So whoever that person is, and Dan, I can see that you're doing some Googling. So
Jack Harlow, that's his name.
Jack Harlow. I read somewhere that it was his first audition, like, ever. And to get the lead role in a movie like that, that's pretty incredible. So we'll see.
Pretty it's pretty big shoes to fill. Pretty big sneakers. Big
Absolutely.
Jordans
yeah,
to fill there. So yeah, no, that was my news. Did you have any news?
No, I didn't. I've had quite a busy week. For anybody who's listened in the past few weeks, you might have heard me talk about this, but I recently have come on board of the Northwest Film Center. Actually, by the time this is released, we're going to have a brand new name. So I'm just going to say it on here because this won't be released until after that happens. So nice. I feel okay saying it. But the Northwest Film Center is now, so in Portland, Oregon, we have the Northwest Film Center, which has been connected to the Portland Art Museum. It's been around for over 50 years now. And it's been a really cool hub for screening films, filmmaking services. We've rented out equipment for many years and do classes for both kids and adults. And we're taking things into a very different direction, kind of bringing forward the idea that cinematic experiences don't necessarily have to just be the one thing that we think of. It could be, now we have podcasts and we have VR and AR and XR, and there's all sorts of different ways that we can experience cinematic storytelling. So from now on, the Northwest Film Center is going to be known as PAM, which is Portland Art Museum, PAM CUT. And CUT stands for the Center for an Untold Tomorrow. And that's what we're going for. And I am the associate director of creative programs for PAM CUT. And it's really exciting. We've got a lot of really cool things going on. We just did some screenings this past weekend of some of our honorees for the Cinema Unbound Awards, which we're recording this before that happens. This will come out after that happens. It's March 8th. And we are celebrating some voices who have been pushing forward the idea of cinematic storytelling. And yesterday I was there for the screenings for the Mitchells versus the Machines, which is a Netflix movie, and we've been partnering with Netflix for a little while, and they were very excited to have us screen this, and to watch it on a big screen was pretty incredible. It's a really beautiful movie. I was definitely sobbing during it while watching it yesterday, even though I've seen it before, and we are celebrating Phil Lord and Chris Miller, who were the producers on it. And for anybody who is unfamiliar with them, they directed the Lego Movie and 21 and 22 Jump Street, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. They did Clone High. They were involved with The Last Man on Earth, the television series. They also produced Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, and they produced The Mitchells versus the Machines. And it was really exciting to watch that with an audience. And we also screened The Nowhere Inn, because we are honoring Carrie Brownstein. And The Nowhere Inn is a very fascinating movie. I believe it's streaming on Hulu right now, where it follows a fictionalized version of Carrie Brownstein, who is making a documentary about her friend Annie Clark, St. Vincent. And it's the story of them making this documentary, and it's all about identity and kind of the ways that we represent ourselves versus the way that we really are, and the pressure of, kind of blurring that line sometimes for more compelling storytelling. So that's one that I'm thinking about a lot after having seen it just for the first time yesterday, and I'm really trying to kind of decode it in my mind. So anyway, I kind of went off on a little bit of a tangent here, but everybody should definitely check out the Pam Cut website. It's going to be at pamcut.org, PAMCUT. And we've got a lot of really cool things coming up with Cut. It's going to be really awesome. I'm really excited to be part of it. So anyway, I think that where this came from is because I've been so busy, because it's been my first full on week doing this new position. So I haven't had my eyes on the news nearly as much as I typically do. So it's funny because it's also my job to kind of know about what's going on, but I haven't been looking out in the same way that I have been for this show. So hopefully my schedule evens out a little bit where I am able to, focus on both things at the same time. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, congratulations. It sounds like a lot of exciting things are going on down there at the newly renamed Pam Cut.
Yeah. Center for an Untold Tomorrow.
The Center for an Untold Tomorrow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
What? Yeah. I guess tomorrow is always untold. I'm
yeah.
gonna form the Center for an Already Told Yesterday.
That's just living in the past, my friend.
That's called facinghistory.org.
Okay.
Great organization as well. Nothing to do with film, really. But
so, The Fugitive.
Yes.
Dan, do you remember the first time you saw The Fugitive?
In fact, I do.
Okay.
And I am fairly certain that you were there.
Great.
If I remember correctly, and I think I do, this was a film that we saw at we've talked about this before, this mythical movie theater somewhere in, I want to say the Carolinas.
Yeah.
I think North Carolina. And it was a movie theater that was part of a mall that was connected to the hotel where we stayed on a couple of occasions, driving to and from between New Jersey and Georgia, little summer vacation there in Sea Island, Georgia, which we talked about, I think, most recently on the Point Break episode. But this was the theater. This was not a theater in Georgia. This was this multiplex in this mall. And I'm fairly certain that we actually stayed we actually stayed there on the way down to Georgia and on the way back up.
Okay.
Because I remember seeing two movies from the summer of 1993 in that theater. The Fugitive is the one that I'm not 100% certain on, but I'm I'm close that we saw it there. The other film that we saw on that trip would have been Hearts and Souls.
Interesting. Okay.
Yes.
So then I remember what we would have seen the year prior.
Oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about there.
Okay. Yeah.
Should I mention it or save it?
No, because I hope that we do an episode on it sometime.
Oh, I'm sure we will. It's going to happen eventually.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
I'm pretty sure we saw it there, and I don't remember. I mean, I think this was like the whole family went to like saw the movie. I don't think this was just one where like I went with dad or something.
Yeah. So if let's see, if anybody listening was vacationing during the summer of 1993 in Sea Island, Georgia, and there was a 10-year-old child yelling, "I didn't kill my wife," that would have been me.
And an 11-and-a-half-year-old yelling back, "I don't care."
Oh, yeah. That's Scott.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
And then I dive into the pool.
Yeah, like
that would be a really
800
fun
feet.
thing to do on the top of a diving board.
Yeah. Do some fugitive cosplay.
Yeah, just one person's by like the top of the ladder saying like, you know, and then the other person's kind of over there just saying like, "I didn't kill my wife," and the person, yeah, that's great. It's
that's great.
The fugitive LARPing.
Which there's got to be some community out there that does that, like the yearly, you know, U.S. Marshal fugitive hunt where we, you know, retrace the steps of Sam Gerard and his team.
Oh boy, yes. Oh yes. Let's go to Chicago and just like act out the whole thing.
Oh well, this would be the time to do it.
Yeah, that's true.
Next week,
because this is an episode. So this is we're doing this. If you could see, we're releasing this in March of 2022. We're doing an episode. We're doing a series of episodes that all have vaguely March themes, and we know that this movie takes place in March, mostly in March, because there is a scene that happens during a St. Patrick's Day parade. So
the majority of the action in this film,
everything except for the beginning, I guess.
Well, yeah, the flashbacks.
Well, the flashbacks, the fundraiser dinner at the beginning,
that's a flashback.
Well, but the movie starts out with being at the fundraiser.
I'm fairly certain it's still flashback.
But how can it be flashback if we're not starting in whatever March would have been, whatever year?
Well, I guess it's kind of all a montage over the opening credits, isn't it?
Well,
and then they start
over the opening credits, it's kind of going between them being at the fundraiser and then what happens after I'm going to do a synopsis.
Right. It's a back and forth. There's a back and forth. Anyway.
But it doesn't start off in any other timeline. It starts off there. So I'm going to do a little synopsis. After a glamorous evening at a fancy fundraiser, Chicago-based cardiovascular surgeon Dr. Richard Kimball is called into a last-minute surgical procedure while his wife Helen heads home on her own. Before Kimball gets back, Helen is murdered by a man with a prosthetic arm, which Richard discovers as he's fighting with the home intruder. But once the cops start questioning Kimball, it becomes clear that he's the primary suspect. And as it turns out, the court feels the same way. On his bus ride to prison, some of the other felons decide that it's in their best interest to escape, but things end up going haywire, forcing the bus to crash and end up directly on active train tracks. In an effort to help one of the prisoner transporters, Richard carries him to safety and leaps off the bus just as it's about to be destroyed by a train. As one of the two surviving prisoners, Richard takes off with the mission to stitch up an abdominal wound and hide out. But after a nightmare about Helen's death, he decides that the only move he can make is to prove his innocence by tracking down the one-armed man and uncover who was really behind his wife's murder. Meanwhile, U.S. Marshal Samuel Gerard and his team are on the hunt for Kimball and do a pretty good job at it for a while, but Kimball mostly stays a step or two ahead of Gerard. But even with the marshals on their tail, But even with the marshals on his tail, Dr. Kimball manages to find the one-armed man and leaves clues for Gerard to piece together the connection himself, thereby opening up the opportunity for him to expose the real murderer and clear his name. And I just want to go back a little bit, because I said that before Kimball gets back, Helen is murdered by a man with a prosthetic arm. She's murdered by a man who has a prosthetic arm, but she is murdered by a knife. I'm trying to remember what exactly he uses to kill her. Bludgeoning her?
I think he bludgeons her.
Fair enough.
I'm pretty sure
he doesn't murder her with the arm. I just realized that my wording could have been confusing. He does not use it as a weapon.
Yeah. A man who happens to have a murderer who happens to also have a prosthetic limb murders Kimball's wife. The fact that he has a prosthetic arm really just kind of plays into the plot of that. It's something for Kimball to chase him down. If he didn't have the prosthetic arm, I don't know that we'd be talking about it. I don't know that this story would have had anything to go on there.
No, not at all. Yeah, so Harrison Ford does an amazing job as Dr. Richard Kimball. This is during the era, I feel, where Harrison Ford is doing his best acting.
I was going to say, is this peak Harrison Ford?
I'd say, Raiders and Star Wars are kind of in their own little category. But this is where he's doing his best, acting.
Yes, agreed. Yeah, Raiders and Star Wars. Raiders and Star Wars were what really put him on the map.
Yeah.
But then I think you do have to go back to like Witness.
Witness is excellent. Yeah, he's very good in Witness.
Like Witness or The Mosquito Coast to get this level of performance that's not just Harris. He did. There were a lot of other. So this is following up. All right. So this is following up Patriot Games, which comes out the year before, which shows Harrison Ford in that realm of the the guy who's determined to get things figured out. A few years before that, there's Frantic, which I've actually never seen, and I don't know if I'm gonna check it out. I don't know if it's gonna make my Roman Polanski exceptions list.
Right? Yeah, I don't know.
That's Chinatown and Rosemary's Baby are pretty much my
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So I don't know if I would go back to Frantic for that, but
we do
Presumed Innocent.
Okay, well, let's talk about Blade Runner, because that's probably the earliest one, because that was 82, and that's after he does Star Wars, and that's a year after Raiders. So Blade Runner, I feel like, is the beginning of him being serious actor. 85 is Witness. And, then we start to see a different side of him with Working Girl in 88. But then, 91, we get Regarding Henry, which is one that, it might not be everybody's favorite, but for me, it is it's one that I go back to. I really like it.
For Harrison Ford, it's probably I'm trying to think of other Harrison Ford roles, and I feel like it's kind of it's maybe the biggest stretch. It's one where he's not not that all of his roles are the same.
Yeah.
But he's in a very different. He's in very different circumstances.
Yeah.
In Regarding Henry, and it gives him an opportunity to flex and show some versatility.
Sure. Yeah. And then we've got Patriot Games, then The Fugitive, and then Clear and Present Danger. I'm obviously skipping some. And then, we've got another fun one with Sabrina, but then he does Air Force One, which, of course, hello, who doesn't love him in Air Force One? And then he kind of starts to dip back down and then kind of disappears a little bit.
I feel like 6 Days, 7 Nights was kind of the beginning of the end. I think that was the year after Air Force One.
It was. And it feels like it was way further between. There was more time between those, but whatever.
No, it was Air Force. I like Air Force One, and then Yeah, it was a lot of like, I remember he did this one like Random Hearts with Kristen Scott Thomas. That was kind of bleh.
Right.
Hollywood Homicide with Josh Hartnett,
Right.
which was bleh.
Mhm.
And a few others, a few other things that
and then
did.
we're getting into, old Harrison Ford. He did Cowboys and Aliens, which I think is fun and, is a good platform for him. But then, you've got things getting back into Crystal Skull, I think, which was before Cowboys and Aliens. But then there's, that, and then he starts going back into his franchises a little bit more with, the Star Wars movies and, he's doing another Indiana Jones movie now and Blade Runner 2049. So I feel like
Regarding Henry.
Regarding Henry. We'll talk about that on the Regarding Henry episode when we do it. So I feel like The Fugitive is like, I'd say definitely peak Harrison Ford. It shows him at his best acting, and you do get some action in there, but mostly it's the moments where he's giving dialogue and feeling passionate about things, like the ending of this movie when he's approaching the person who is behind everything.
You switched out the samples.
I know, you switched the samples. And I did want to talk about the cast real quick because I feel like that'll help a lot. So Sam Gerard, Tommy Lee Jones, who's so good in this. He won the Academy Award for it, right?
Yeah. Freaking like beat Ralph Fiennes from Schindler's List.
I know.
I mean, among other performances that were nominated that year, but I was like, how do you like Ralph Fiennes in Schindler's List?
Yeah.
I mean, of course, this was before we knew Ralph Fiennes to be the comedic genius that he is.
Oh my God. Absolutely.
but Tommy Lee Jones had also been around for a while.
Totally.
And this was really like he did JFK. He had been around. He'd been in high profile movies, but not like never really broke out, even though like he had these starring roles. Never was not like, a household name. And then he did JFK, got the Oscar nomination for that. And then this, I mean, you watch the beginning of this movie, the opening credits, and it's like, it's the way that they show the stars' names. It's like straight out of the trailer where it's like the like Jones, and the letters are flipping around. And it really sets this movie up as being this like star vehicle for these two actors who are kind of both like hitting their, like peak Tommy Lee Jones. I mean, maybe, but
yeah, well, I mean, this is what kind of launched him off to be able to do things like Men in Black. And, it really just like kick boosted his career big time. I
mean, it was interesting because I was thinking about, my love for like kind of the studio system of Days Gone By and the, that the actors and Tommy Lee Jones from 90 to 95, I feel like there's one movie on his filmography that's not Warner Brothers.
Oh, interesting.
That would be Blown Away. Okay. But he's got JFK, The Fugitive, The Client, Natural Born Killers.
Yeah, was
Batman Forever.
What year was Under Siege? Was that
Under Siege? Oh, yep, 92.
92.
Also,
was that Warner Brothers?
Warner. Yeah.
He's so good in Under Siege.
He fucking elevates Under Siege.
Yeah. And it wasn't until I was watching U.S. Marshals, the sequel to The Fugitive, which I don't think was really, promoted that way.
It's like a spin-off.
Yeah, it's a sequel,
It's a sequel that follows because I mean The Fugitive. So The Fugitive is really structured where it's telling these two stories. Tommy Lee Jones and Harrison Ford are barely on screen together,
right?
And Tommy Lee Jones is also, while he might be like the nemesis here, he's not the villain.
No,
he's the
pursuing.
Obstacle.
Yeah.
He's the opposite. He's the antagonist.
Yeah.
He's trying to find Kimball's motivation is to put the puzzle together about his wife's murder and solve the crime and exonerate himself. And Jones, as Sam Gerard, his goal is to stop him, is to catch Richard Kimball.
Yeah.
So that's one of the brilliant things about that line, about that exchange. I didn't kill my wife. I don't care.
Right.
Is it's so like, I feel, and this is where the script really gets a lot of credit for this movie, in that it doesn't have, there's not like some witty retort, or not some bullshit. You're a murderer and I'm bringing you in. Which I feel like is what that would be like the go-to, but the I don't care is really...
He's just a guy doing his job.
This is his job. Yeah. He's a U.S. Marshal. He catches escaped convicts.
Yeah.
That it is not his job to decide or determine their innocence or guilt. And in fact, when he starts kind of focusing on that aspect of it, because Kimball is brilliantly like leading him along.
Right. No, it's amazing.
It's just one of the many wonderful things about it.
Yeah.
And that
No, I just want to kind of breeze through the cast list just really quick, because there's just a few standouts that I wanted to mention. You know, we have Joe Pantoliano, who's one of the U.S. Marshals. We have, and I don't know if I'm going to say his name right, but Jeroen Krabbe.
Jeroen Krabbe,
who's a Dutch actor who I really put him. I mean, he's been in so much, but like for me, it's this character and his character in The Prince of Tides.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Where you're just this guy is just like really gets under my skin. Ugh.
Such a smug douchebag.
Yeah. And it's one. He's fantastic in this, and I also wanted to let me just see. And then of course we have Julianne Moore in this movie in a small role. We have Jane Lynch in a small role. Jane
Lynch is fantastic, by the way. But coming back to Julianne Moore,
sure.
How does Julianne Moore have third billing in this movie?
Does she really?
Is the first name after the credits. She is billed before Joey Pants,
that must have been a contractual thing.
But she wasn't like Shortcuts, I think, was like the only other thing that she had done here. I actually I kept track of like when she came, when she appears on screen, and she's basically got like a couple of minutes of screen time.
Yeah, so before this, she was in The Hand That Rocks the Cradle, The Gun in Betty Lou's Handbag, Body of Evidence, and Benny and June. That's it. Shortcuts was after this.
Oh, Shortcuts was after this. Okay.
Shortcuts, well, let's see. When did Shortcuts come out?
That's same year.
Same year.
It's same year.
That was October. So this, clearly if we saw it during that summer, then Shortcuts came out after.
Yeah, no, this was like July or August in 93 that it came out. I thought August.
Yeah, and you mentioned the writing in the movie, and that's credited to Jeb Stewart. And Jeb Stewart, doesn't have a ton of credits to his name, but a significant one is Die Hard. And so it makes a lot of sense when you think about it, where it's just like, okay, that one is more of an action movie, yes, but it's also an extremely well crafted film. They're like the pieces all come together in a really fascinating way. And in this one, he does the same thing. And I really appreciate the way that he structures the Sam Gerard character as being somebody who you are kind of, you're not like rooting for him because you don't want him to catch Kimball, but you're also not wanting him to fail because you know that he's not the bad guy. It's just like
you want him to believe Kimball.
Yeah.
you want, I mean, I think what you want, which is what happens,
Yeah.
but like you want him to help Kimball because you know he's good. I mean,
Well, yeah, I mean, throughout the film, you see Kimball doing these like random kind gestures that remind people or like give some indications that he's not a bad person. Like, he helps out this kid when he's posing as a janitor. He gives a suggestion because he sees the guy that gets injured, the like the prisoner, I don't know, transportation guy or whatever. He tells them when they're wheeling him in that, what's wrong with him to better treat him. And it's like, though doing those things are exposing him more and more, but he can't help but be a good doctor.
Yeah, I mean the Hippocratic Oath.
There you go.
If someone is in need of help, you help them.
Yeah, but it's just like he's a truly good person and who got put in the middle of this really terrible situation. And I don't know. Yes, what's up?
Oh no, I'm sorry. I wanted to throw in. So, on top of everything else, his that was not a Freudian elf slip.
Yeah.
On top of everything else, his wife, who's played by Celia Ward, by the way,
yes.
Who's just fantastic. She is. She's from a wealthy family. She's, independently wealthy. And so the cops who really just kind of want to like close the case, they're not too, and honestly, all of the evidence points to Kimball.
Right, yeah.
But when they find out that, she's worth a lot and he stands to inherit a lot, all of the signs, and the courtroom scene really shows this well. All of the evidence points to Kimball, and it's just that there's this missing context that is really impossible to show a jury that, like they play the 911 tape
right.
and she's like, gasping for air and saying like, he's trying to kill me. He's still in the house. He's still in the house. Richard, and it's like, because she hears Richard coming into the house and then he fights with the one-armed man.
Right.
Frederick Sykes.
Yes. Played by Andreas Katsoulas. Am I saying that right?
I think so.
Okay.
He's very good. I like his voice. He's so like, he's very believably salt of the earth.
Yeah, he's good.
Yeah, they said a one-armed man did it. I have a prosthetic arm. Of course, we went through this all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, going back to what you were saying, though, about all of the evidence pointing to him, it's when, and everything about the wife, Helen, being wealthy and him standing to gain a lot, it's when, Sam Gerard is talking to the U.S. Marshals and they're just like, oh, it looks like he's, his wife was wealthy. And he's like, yeah, but he's a doctor. Like, he's a very successful doctor. Like, he doesn't need an inheritance.
He's one of the top heart surgeons in Chicago.
Yeah.
He's not worrying about... Right, yeah, it's a good point, but it's also the type of thing where if you're looking to solve the great thing is, and like as obnoxious as the cops are, especially the two main cops, there's Detective Rossetti, who I feel like it was the, like, we need someone to play a Chicago cop. Get this guy.
Yeah, it's like Dennis Franz is unavailable.
As is who's the actor who plays his brother in Die Hard 2?
Oh, I don't know.
I can picture his face. I can't remember his, like, was it Ernie Sabella?
Oh, right. Yeah, but it's like
he's
find
not
the
available.
closest person to Dennis Franz and we're good. So
yeah.
Anyway,
and then the other guy is like, and these guys are also, they're Andrew Davis regulars. We talked about them with Under Siege because they're also in Under Siege.
Yes.
But what I like is that you don't necessarily begrudge them. I mean, you know that Kimball is innocent, or you believe as the audience that Kimball is innocent, and you don't. you don't question that, and the fact that the cops are questioning that, it's upsetting to you as an audience member. But when you step back and you look at why his prints are all over the crime scene,
Right.
they don't have any other prints. They have no real evidence of anybody else being there. But, and then also there's kind of like, it's that those flaws in law enforcement when you're dealing with cops who are, investigators who are working long hours. And it's like, well, if all the evidence is pointing to this person and there's additional circumstantial evidence that's also pointing to this person, then it must be this person.
Yeah. And I think that one other thing that I like about this movie is that, and this is, my 2022 mind after, seeing so much about the problems with law enforcement. And you're right, there's quotas, and there's, they don't have the time to, really get down to the bottom of things if there's enough evidence pointing in one direction. So for them, it's very convenient that there is that inheritance, and that, there's the fingerprints and there's the 911 call. So
Case closed.
Yeah. It's, and that is, not being hidden, that it's like, there's a problem with the, with law enforcement in this movie. So,
Yeah. So it moves so well. It takes its time, just, and kind of coming back to the whole, like, this is a near perfect movie.
Right.
Maybe you could even get rid of the near, because I think that in terms of like what it's trying to do, its goals as a piece of entertainment, I think it maybe even exceeds those goals. Like, I remember when this movie came out and everyone's like, oh, okay, all right. Oh, so it's Harrison Ford and they're doing a big screen version of The Fugitive. Okay, well, this should be fun.
Yeah.
And I think people expected something on the level of like Patriot Games, which was an entertaining popcorn thriller, which this is. But
Sure.
this is, I mean, there's a reason why this was nominated for Best Picture. This is also the reason why I don't think there need to be more than 5 Best Picture nominees, because the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences have been more than capable in the past of recognizing films that are like mainstream pop culture films that are that are kind of the best examples of those genres.
Sure. Yeah.
And of those kinds. This movie is, I mean, yes, it's exciting. The score is great. The cinematography is great. The action is, I mean, maybe save for the part where like he jumps and down like out of the tunnel, where Harrison Ford jumps out of the tunnel and plummets that distance, and then just kind of like,
well,
comes out. He's always seeming like worn and tired.
And this is where I want to get to what you had mentioned at the very beginning, which was about, the movies seeming more realistic before the 90s, the portrayals of the hardships. And one thing that I was noticing when watching this is that they make more of an effort than most movies to show how trying a lot of these things are. And I was thinking about that mostly at the end, because there's this scene where, and this is a real
spoiler alert
moment, and
it's been almost 30 years.
It's fine. So basically what happens is Nichols is the bad guy, the friend, the other
Richard.
Yeah. Guy from Prince of Tides. And basically what happens is, in order to push forward the use of a drug called Provasic with a pharmaceutical company called Devlin McGregor. I love all of those, by the way. Perfect name for a drug, perfect pharmaceutical company name. Devlin McGregor. I love it. And so he had falsified the samples, the tissue samples that Kimball had provided to him. He switched them out with ones from a healthy liver in order to get this drug pushed through. And so he approaches Nichols at this banquet, this conference, and they're in the like Chicago Hilton, and they go up to the roof and they're fighting, like real like fist fighting. And what I love about it is that they're throwing like heavy punches, but it's just like tiring for both of them, clearly. And then they're
old. fighting. They're fighting like they're actually like middle-aged doctors who are having a fight. Though, man, Nichols at the start of their fight like fucking tosses him.
Yeah.
We
know that he is physically fit. He goes to the tennis club regularly. You know, he puts in effort into his fitness. So that's established at least.
Though just because you go to the tennis club doesn't mean you're playing tennis.
And then you know we get a good look at Kimball's body when he's like stitching his wounds up, which is a badass scene to begin with. And you know it's like, okay, he takes care of himself. All right. So it makes sense given their like ages and everything that you know where they are. Also,
but they also still look like normal guys. It's not like we don't have like Dwayne Johnson up there. No,
absolutely not. And so when they crash through this like skylight and end up on top of an elevator, well, Kimball ends up on top of the elevator and Nichols beneath, and Kimball's like knocked out. And then when he eventually gets out of the elevator, you can see him struggling. You can see him like you can tell that he's being moved. He's being driven by his like will to stop this man and nothing else. Like his body does not want him to do it, but he is making it happen.
But that's what Harrison Ford is so good at.
Yeah.
And we talked about this a little bit on Air Force One.
Yeah.
Where what Harrison Ford is so good at is letting you see how his mind is working and how he's making it. Like there's the part in this, he like kicks in, there's like boards over, you know, or he gets to, I'm trying to find in my notes where this is. Yeah, I think it's Sykes' house where he breaks in, and you see him kind of like recognize like, oh, okay, there's boards over the door. All right, I'm just gonna kick them in. Yeah. And it's like a second, but you see that look on his face where he makes the decision to do it, and he's not just running on instinct. Like he's actually processing and thinking, what do I need to do? And you're right, he's so driven by his purpose.
Yeah.
This is another like Harrison Ford trait, something that he just conveys so well is that sense of being driven by purpose. Yeah. I mean, and especially like you said, dragging himself by that point in the film. It's so you see it when he jumps off the train or when he jumps off the bus when the train is coming and he's like standing there. He's like, what do I do? Okay, I jump.
Yeah, he's not a graceful person when it comes to jumping off of a bus, you know, because he's never done it before.
No, he's you know, like an actual person, like a real person.
I also want to call out another moment that I feel like comes across as being very real, where he's at the hospital after, you know, starting to be on the run and, you know, where he goes to stitch himself up and he's in the room of some guy who's like, not in a coma because he clearly can, but like he's like sleeping and hooked up to all this stuff. And he takes his food that's delivered to him, which is like scrambled eggs and toast and stuff. And the way that he kind of piles on with his fingers the eggs onto the bread to like make the sandwich. And then he like kind of licks his fingers where it's just like, yeah, that's right. This guy's been like walking through, you know, a riverbank for like overnight. And you know, he's got to be so tired and hungry that, like, you know, the other time that we've seen him, you know, he's been like at a banquet where he's like doing fancy things. And then here he is desperately just trying to like pile this scrambled eggs onto this piece of bread.
And this is after he has leapt from the tunnel off the dam.
It's amazing.
Like he has been through it already.
Yeah, the movie's just beginning. He's only just become a fugitive.
He does, if I may, in this film, tend to have some pretty good fortune come his way. For instance, just when he is really needing a disguise, he notices a trucker take off his coveralls and leave them in the front seat of his truck, not locking the door. So Kimball can just go and grab the coveralls and put them on. And then, oh, what luck, there's a hospital right there nearby. And I mean, you know, I'm totally up this movie's ass, but like,
gotta
point out.
Gotta point out what?
No, just a couple of the couple of spots that are like,
Well, you know, what are you gonna do?
Oh,
so
no.
I and we have to give, of course, a shout out, because it's why we're talking about this movie, to the scene where he blends into the St. Patrick's Day parade. You know, that's how we know when things are. Let's see, he probably, I'm trying to think of the timeline of like when he becomes a fugitive, because let's see, the Ides of March would have been just before the parade.
Oh,
so I guess at that point he was probably staying in that basement of the Polish family. And yeah, I don't know. But anyway, so St. Patrick's Day, he's in the parade and blending in, and he just manages to like take off his jacket so they can't recognize him by that. And I love the way that Tommy Lee Jones like jumps up to see over the crowd. And this is where I want to get into a conversation about U.S. Marshals, Dan, because I've only watched the first like half hour or so of U.S. Marshals, so I couldn't give a full synopsis on it. But basically, it's a situation where Wesley Snipes' character is he drives a tow truck and careens into, some guy loses track of his car and almost crashes into him, and then that forces him to kind of crash and knock into a bunch of cars and stuff. And because they find a gun in his car, they arrest him. And so he is, sent to prison for no real reason. And somebody on his flight to a prison starts some shit, plane crashes, we have a fugitive, Sam Gerard is there to go find him. So that's kind of like as far as I got. I don't know what more there really is, but Robert Downey Jr. is there to be with the U.S. Marshals.
He comes in as a consultant.
Something
or
like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I do remember, I did not get a chance to review it this week. I have seen it before, and I remember what the twist. I remember something to do with the twist.
Okay.
There's definitely a twist, and I don't need to go into any further detail.
Right. So U.S. Marshals, it's the sequel, but also spinoff. And let's see, it was directed by Stuart Baird, who did not do The Fugitive. Stuart Baird, let's see.
He did Executive Decision.
What's that?
He did Executive Decision.
Mm-hmm. I mean, definitely no schlub. Was also an editor. But as far as directing, it's really just Executive Decision, U.S. Marshals, and Star Trek Nemesis. But also edited things like Skyfall and Salt and Demolition Man, Die Hard 2, Lethal Weapon 2.
Much more accomplished editor.
Absolutely.
Than
Tango and
director.
Cash. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, and this one, I mean, different writing team altogether. And yeah, it's like you have the same U.S. Marshal crew plus Robert Downey Jr. It's Wesley Snipes this time. And I don't know, but all I have to say is that at one point, Tommy Lee Jones has his shirt off and it's like, damn, Tommy Lee Jones. You wouldn't necessarily expect it, but that dude is physically fit in the 90s.
Well,
but I guess we kind of get a glimpse of that also in Under Siege, But U.S. Marshal was 1998, so it's already 5 years after The Fugitive. But it's interesting that they made an attempt to bring this movie forward bring the fugitive forward and focus on something else. And of course, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, this is the character that he, won an Oscar for, and it's like, what else can we do to capitalize on the success of that? And
it's also the only character that you could that really you'd say could have further like movie worthy adventures. That, I mean, like, it's like, yes, you could follow up on Richard Kimball, but like, what
just
is
being
he
a
like?
doctor?
He's gonna remarry, and then his like another one-armed man is gonna kill his new wife. No.
Yeah.
So I think it made sense to follow Gerard, and you have the ensemble there. You have like the whole
Joey
the
Pants,
team
yeah.
of the U.S. Marshals. And yeah, throwing in Robert Downey Jr., who I heard this was before we had the fully rehabilitated Robert Downey Jr.
No, yeah, this was peak cocaine.
Yeah, I mean,
amongst other things,
possibly peak. I mean, maybe peak, unless there might have been a plateau for like a good 15 years,
yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. But yeah, he was apparently like just really unreliable. So it doesn't seem like things necessarily gelled on U.S. Marshals the way that they did with The Fugitive. Not that I know much about the production of The Fugitive,
right?
But it definitely feels like a much more cohesive production. I guess in just the way that the product turned out.
Yeah.
So yeah, and a couple of other. I wanted to kind of go into a little bit about the series that that it was based on, just because I had not seen the series, and
me either, but it was so popular,
streaming, right? I was thinking about some ideas, and one of the things I was wondering as I was watching The Fugitive, I was like, man, this reminds me a lot about Les Miserables. The character of Jean Valjean, who's a good person who committed a crime. For those who don't know the story, he steals a loaf of bread from a bakery. This is the pre-French Revolution times. His sister and his sister's child are starving and sick and dying, and he steals a loaf of bread to feed them. He's captured. He's put in prison. And then he is, I don't think he's released. I feel like he escapes. I don't remember exactly how, but Javert, who's basically the Gerard, and Gerard is named for Javert intentionally, as I discovered.
Really?
Yes, because the creator of the series was inspired by Les Miserables. So I hadn't read this until I was just reading up on the series, and I was like, oh, okay, well, that's why it makes sense. Because it was funny, I was just like thinking of different castings, because it's like, this is such a like Harrison Ford, Tommy Lee Jones, like star vehicle. And I was thinking, I was like, oh, Hugh Jackman and Russell Crowe, Les Mis, and that makes sense.
Interesting.
But yeah, or Liam Neeson, Jeffrey Rush, if you want to go with the 1998 version of Les Miserables.
Sure, yeah.
So interestingly, yeah, it is definitely based in part on Les Miserables. So that that's interesting. That adds a little more like kind of speculation in what more you could do with it. And it's I also thought it was I remember at the time, like, the Harrison Ford having a beard in it was a big deal. Like, he hadn't had a beard, he hadn't had facial hair in his movies up until this point.
That's true, and he rocks that beard.
He sure does.
Yeah.
Other great sequences in this, the setup when he's staying in the basement, he's staying in that little apartment in the house of the Eastern European mother and son. And when the cops pull up and Kimball sees that the cops are there, First of all, this is brilliantly foreshadowed by the raid that the U.S. Marshals do on the home of the other
fugitive
who escapes with Kimball. So, which they also set up brilliantly as a tease, because you think when they're on that raid, you think they're going for Kimball, because I think by that point you've forgotten that there was another fugitive.
Yeah, totally.
And then it's not, and it's this great character piece where the fugitive has one of the marshals, Newman, held hostage, and Gerard basically has a perfect shot and shoots the convict. What I also love about that is you see how pissed Gerard is that he did not take him alive.
Right. Yeah. He's disappointed. He's let down by himself. And I just want to kind of follow up on that. So basically what happens after that scene is the one more like rookie U.S. Marshal is kind of complaining. And he was just like, basically saying, I wish you would have negotiated with him instead of shooting and like hurt my like eardrum or whatever. And
I'm gonna have permanent hearing damage.
And he goes up to him and he like says like, okay, can you hear me? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, I don't negotiate. And it was just like, I love the way he says that. And then Dan, I don't know if you remember, but in the beginning of U.S. Marshals, they are on a home raid to find somebody, and the guy who they're going to get just goes to like a baby crib, like where his baby is crying, and the same like rookie guy, who's not so much of a rookie anymore, even though he's standing in front of a baby, because the guy won't turn around, he shoots him. And as it turns out, there was a shotgun in the crib. So Tommy Lee Jones kind of goes up to him and he's just like, great work, like great instincts. And it's like clear, it's just a nod to, he has learned from what has happened in the past, the things that you have to do to accomplish your mission.
Yeah. And I want to point out another moment, and we don't have any sound in this episode, but this would be like the one sound clip that I would want to add in is Jane Lynch when she's being interrogated by Gerard about if he came to you for help, what would you do if he came to you for help? And she was like, if he came to me for help, I would help him.
Yeah.
But that's not his style.
Yeah.
He wouldn't come to me. It's not his style. It's so great.
And I think that was like her first film role. If not, then among the first. We don't have to fact check that. That's okay.
No.
But
early Jane Lynch.
So what I want to talk about now, so we talked about U.S. Marshals, how that was a follow-up to this movie, following a completely different situation. And, we know that The Fugitive is adapted from a television series. One thing that we haven't talked about is the movie Wrongfully Accused, which was the parody of this.
Yes.
Was that Leslie Nielsen? It was probably Leslie Nielsen, right?
It was Leslie Nielsen. I saw that at the Cranford Theater. I think it was
our
a family
hometown
movie
theater.
trip. I think it was a family movie trip.
So it's Leslie Nielsen, Richard Crenna as Fergus Falls. We got Kelly LeBrock, Melinda McGraw, and let me just read the IMDb synopsis on here. Ryan Harrison, that's clever, is framed for murder and must prove himself innocent by finding a mysterious one-eyed, one-armed, one-legged man after escaping from a bus accident on the way to jail. So direct parody, a Pat Proft film. So, and it also lampoons, based on the images I see, Mission Impossible, and I'm sure there's some other things in here that they...
Because that was like a 1998 release, right? Or 99?
It was 98. That's right.
98.
I was thinking of rewatching this one in preparation, but I just didn't have the time, unfortunately. And so Wrongfully Accused. So, Dan, tell me.
Well,
before
you have
we
another
do,
thing? Oh, a brief, yeah, because this, of course, there's other iterations of The Fugitive. To mention briefly, a 2000 TV series reboot with
That's
Tim
right.
Daly, which and Michael T. Williamson, and I haven't seen that. What I did watch was the most recent update of The Fugitive from 2020. A Roku channel series of short episodes, like 8-minute episodes,
Okay.
about an ex-con named Mike Farrow, who he had been imprisoned vehicular. I think it was like drunk driving, killed his like brother and sister-in-law.
Okay.
And then there's a subway bombing, and he's like, they see him on the surveillance videos that he's like they're watching the surveillance. It's funny because they're like, look at that guy. He's a guy with jeans and a black hoodie carrying a bag. That's our suspect.
Mm-hmm.
That is the most vague description
Right.
ever. Somebody with something did something, and that's our suspect.
Yeah.
And so this bombing happens, and then they're reviewing the the films. So I'm not quite sure what office this is. Maybe the counterterrorism unit, which would be ironic because it is being headed by Kiefer Sutherland.
Oh, okay.
Kiefer Sutherland takes on the Gerard role, or he's in that. He's got, rather than the big dog, he's like, "Can I get a coffee, sir?" And the coffee, sir, and it's
okay.
It's
all right.
It's not great. I didn't watch a whole lot of it. It's set in LA. And yeah, I guess so. Then, like, he's the fugitive, and he's trying to prove himself right, and they can't find him. And
so
okay,
yeah. So then,
so
all
there's
right.
that.
So then, what would you do?
This is such a challenging one. It's because it's really, the question usually is what would you do that hasn't already been done,
right? Mm-hmm.
And I think when I think about this, I think like, well, you like gender swap the roles. It doesn't need to be two men. So just kind of like opening up, maybe not necessarily quote unquote gender swapping, but like just opening it up to allow for that, and thinking of like, all right, who are a couple of actors who like this would be a great showcase for. So I don't know, maybe you have like a Viola Davis as Gerard, or I think I mentioned Kerry Washington on the last episode, but Kerry Washington again. I was thinking about different pairings and how would you do this? And I don't necessarily know what you would do. Are you really going to go back to the Richard Kimball story that's been done in 2 series and a movie? Are you going to do something? I think the best way to go with it is using the series, and to a lesser extent the film, as a jumping off point, and maybe finding something else. Maybe it's not maybe we don't have a guy with a prosthetic arm, but like what would be the update of that? Like what would be the 2022, not that people don't have prosthetic limbs anymore. That's actually, that's been a constant for quite some time. But like, what could you?
Well, also because The Fugitive has really become so associated with there being a one-armed man who, that's such a famous part of it.
So, but I think as much as you can do to take away things like that, things that you are automatically going to identify with the movie and the original series. So renaming the characters, I don't think going to the extent of like having it, you could have it set in LA, that's fine. But like having it be like this whole terrorism thing, like combining 24 with The Fugitive, I don't think that worked out as well. Like I think it should still remain as a story, and it probably would work better as a series. Maybe not like a 22 episode season series, but like a 10 episode, like a Noah Hawley, I think would probably be my top choice to do it. Just because
I mean, when there's one great example of a television adaptation of like a perfectly classic movie, like Noah Hawley's the one person who's really nailed it.
Well, Noah Hawley, or I mean, like maybe like there's Jason Katims as well, but I don't think this one. I think this is more of a Noah Hawley deal here. So to do a type of limited series, and I mean the casting options, I'm trying to think of interesting people to play them, and so I'm like using Gerard and Kimball as the names, but you could sort of, I was like, Bill Hader as Kimball would be an interesting choice. A Sam Jackson Gerard I know would be really easy, but it would also be very entertaining.
I believe that he was actually considered for a role in U.S. Marshals.
Oh yes, I think the Wesley Snipes role.
Probably.
Yeah. No, but I would love to see him as like in the Gerard role. I think it would be an awesome, like if you really wanted to do like a thing where you take two big stars and put them in like do the same credits idea. I'm like, have Denzel Washington and Will Smith ever been in anything together?
Huh.
And you could that would work either way.
Yeah, sure.
That would, in fact, I think I would rather see Denzel Washington in the Kimball role, because I feel like we've seen him in the Gerard role in other things. So, like the aforementioned Viola Davis, Jake Gyllenhaal, I think would make a fine Kimball. I don't know. I'm just running down different names. Yeah. I'm like, oh, well, this is someone who would be good at this. But I feel like the Jake Gyllenhaal route would be like the most traditional route to go in terms of casting the role. But I don't see, I mean, I think, of course you've got like the updated technology and social media and things like that could actually play into the suspense of this. And help build that tension of like, in this, like he knows there are cameras when he goes to the prison when Kimball visits Clive,
another one-armed man.
By the way, while we're talking about Clive Driscoll, the one thing I would want to see follow up on with Kimball is I want to see him go back and give an explanation to Clive Driscoll. Yeah. Like he gave, like, oh, this guy gets
a whole
misunderstanding.
I'm so sorry to have wasted your time.
Yeah, and he's like, you're here, like, let's talk. And like, I wish I could, like, he should go back and be like, look, here's the deal. So that's my idea. I don't really have I don't have a concrete
That's fine.
plan for this one, John. What do you say? What do you have?
All right. So I'm not suggesting a parody because that has already been done. But what I am suggesting is a comedic version that exists in a world where the movie The Fugitive already exists. So what I would propose is a movie with, and I know that this might seem like a little too obvious or maybe a little too like worn out, but with Seth Rogen in the Richard Kimball role, and just for lack of a better way of explaining it, and Danny McBride in the Gerard role, something where there is this U.S. Marshal who is trying to find this fugitive, somebody who is, wrongfully accused, if you will, who is trying to clear their name and who is using the movie The Fugitive as a framework for how they are going about proving their own innocence. And I feel like who could do it better? Who could do it better than those guys? And you could have a lot of those other people like Bill Hader in there and Will Forte and Andy Samberg and all those other amazing people who kind of fit into that world. But I mean, who's also a better comedy version of Tommy Lee Jones than Danny McBride? I mean, seriously.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of who would be a better comic version
Because
of
he's such a good douchebag, and but like he also has the capability of kind of proving himself worthy of your appreciation.
I feel like I'd rather see him in the Nichols role.
No, I wouldn't want him in the Nichols role. No, because he's too present. He's too much of a like of a big presence to be
Yeah.
somebody who's trying to just kind of be a little under the radar because he's the bad guy.
I have mixed feelings on Danny McBride.
I feel like if Danny McBride was Nichols, it would be obvious from the jump that that was the bad guy. Also, there doesn't have to be a Nichols type of character. You know, we're not remaking The Fugitive.
Right, yeah,
This is just a movie that would, yeah. But I feel like Danny McBride, speaking of the Mitchells versus the Machines before, who he voices the role of the dad in it and is really delightful and heartwarming and can pull off something, you know, where he's not just the asshole.
Swearing?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I don't know. I have come to really appreciate him, especially with The Righteous Gemstones, and then kind of revisiting some of his past roles. It's just a delight to watch him do what he does.
You know, sorry, not backtrack a little bit here, but going back to like another thing that I might do with it, and this is really weird, and there's like no actual way to do this, but I would love to take The Fugitive. And by the way, I respect the hell out of this movie for many reasons, but also because it comes in at like a smooth, like just over 2 hours.
Yeah.
And which is right. But I would potentially add some other. So here's one. So one idea is I would add some flashbacks to show like, okay, in college, he was like a champion diver.
Uh-huh.
I kind of want to like establish a couple of things.
I don't want that. I don't want
like
that.
Scouting. There's also if it was a series, I would want that. Also, the other, I guess, direction I would take in this shit. I lost my I lost my
Marbles?
my thought here. Yeah, well, no, I lost those a while ago. But yeah, the other possibility, and this is interesting because I had thought about this, and then when I was reading up on the series, this was a rumor, but that you would do a remake of it, and you would even do it like similarly, but at the end, kind of like a Usual Suspects reveal that it was him. Because I'm thinking about like all those flashbacks, and I was watching it and I was like trying to look for different angles. I'm like, all those flashbacks, like it's all being told from his perspective. So what if he did kill his wife? What if he was going to get away with it? What if and there were rumors that one of the possibilities for the end of the series was that it would be like Richard Kimball, flash forward to 6 months after he like catches the one-armed man. And then he's like on a beach, and then you see him like, come back into like a hotel room or something and remove a prosthetic arm.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I don't think the idea of having him have a prosthetic arm works, because especially if he's like a big name surgeon.
Yeah.
Not that you could not be a successful surgeon with a prosthetic limb, but
right.
I don't know.
There's one other thing that I want to mention, and then we can get to our next episode's movie.
Yes.
Okay, so this is when I was living in Philadelphia, so it was like the early aughts, and I was at a house party, and this was the era when everybody in their 20s was playing kickball. Like there were like kickball leagues, and I was at this house
those
party.
Years.
What's that?
It was that year.
It was that year, and I was at a house party, and there were a couple of there were like a bunch of people that were on different teams that played in like a little like unofficial kickball league. And they all had these amazing punny names. And this one team's name was Dr. Richard Kickball. And I will never forget that. And it's so good. Dr. Richard Kickball. So anyway, that's all I wanted to. I just needed to make sure to mention that before we finished this episode.
No, that's a wonderful last thing to state there. Other than that, just like if for some reason you're listening to this and you've never seen The Fugitive, hopefully this has convinced you to check it out.
Okay, and so I should also explain. I said that for me, it's a near perfect movie. The only thing for me that I wish that it would have done better was including more. And there are female roles aside from Helen, the wife who dies. You know, there is a woman who is a U.S. Marshal. There is women who are doctors. But I wish that there was just a bigger presence of women. And also, it is just a very white cast.
Yes, it's also 1993.
I don't care.
Yeah.
That's no excuse.
Well, okay. Now, and we don't need to get into this right now, but I do think sometimes it is important when assessing like the diversity of a cast.
But in this case, the one of the women, which is one of the U.S. Marshals, is also black, and it just very much seems to me like they were trying to like be like, well, this cast is pretty white and it's very male. Let's get a black woman in there. And that's what it feels like to me looking at it now. I'm not saying I totally I hear what you're saying, but it could have also done better. That said,
I'm sure if it was made today, it would be. I mean, I'm sure if it was made 20 years ago, it would be.
Yeah, I know, 100%. But
yeah,
just saying that, just kind of getting my thoughts out there. Anyway, Dan, what are we going to be doing on our next episode of Ruined Childhoods?
Our next in our series of vaguely March-related movies will be 2011's political drama, directed by George Clooney, called The Ides of March. And yeah, that should be available to listen to, I think, by the aforementioned Ides of March 15th.
Yeah, so check it out. You know, you've probably seen the poster where it's Ryan Gosling holding up the half of the magazine with George Clooney's face on it over his face. I feel like I remember seeing the bus ads in LA when I was living there with that on it all the time. And
it's Clooney, it's Gosling, Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Oh, right. Yeah. So I'm excited to rewatch it. I remember seeing it when it first came out, but I don't remember having any thoughts on it whatsoever. So
Paul Giamatti, right?
Paul Giamatti's in it. Yeah. Was Philip Seymour Hoffman also in it? I don't remember.
Yeah. Okay. Philip Seymour Hoffman. Yep. Philip Seymour Hoffman's in it. And Evan Rachel Wood, Marissa Tomei, Jeffrey Wright, Max Minghella. So a cast of name players. And it was a movie that we'll talk about a little bit more, but I think it's a movie that arrived with a good deal of hype, and I don't know that most people felt it lived up to that hype.
Well, Dan, as you are being chased through some sort of sewer system aqueduct, I wish you a good journey.
Good journey.